So when I do this, what does that mean?
That means you're on.
On and off.
Now, now that means it's on because it's the opposite. So then I would just, I'm not talking.
As soon as I hit it, oh,
should I?
Hello? Does this work at all? Am I coming through? Okay. No, it does come through. Is it coming through better now?
Actually, what I think will happen is it projects very well on the live streaming and the video.
Okay.
It's just in this room with all the fans and everything, it's very difficult to hear.
Okay.
So I would leave the mic on when you want to talk, but I would use, as you said, your outside voice so everybody can hear.
So, commissioners, did everybody hear what the administrator said? Did you hear that okay? In addition to that, I'm usually absolutely on top of the technologies, as you all know. But I do not have the bar that will allow me to recognize you. So what I would like to do is we're just going to go back to kind of the way we used to do it. So I'm going to try to keep looking around. If you are going to be seeking recognition, please raise your hand. And then your microphones are working to the extent the administrator mentioned. But I will not see you on my screen in order to know that you are seeking recognition. So we'll just go back to that for tonight and hope for the best later on. But I think it's just going to be it's not going to be a big deal. We'll just go with it as we can. So that said, we will start tonight's meeting. Please, for our invocation, we have Reverend Michael Beach. Is that the proper title? If you would like to come up, please, and lead us in prayer. And as I said, please indicate your congregation for us.
Okay. Yes, by way of introduction, I'm Michael Beach. I'm a minister for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And thank you for inviting us to come. So let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we come before thee this evening with gratitude and thankful hearts for all the blessings thou hast bestowed upon us. We're grateful for thy Son, Jesus Christ, for his atoning sacrifice that extends mercy and grace to all of thy children. We're grateful for this time to meet in this planning commission, for those who are here as public servants and who are serving in their official capacities in their jobs. We're grateful for their dedicated service and commitment in making this community a better place for all to live, to work, to serve, worship, and raise their families and children. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy in this beautiful country and the liberties extended to all. We pray that thy Spirit may be with us this evening and upon those who will be conducting business. Understanding and a willing heart to be patient and kind, that we may all be able to disagree without being disagreeable or having contention in our hearts, that we may willingly be open-minded and able to come to solutions to resolve the issues and the matters that lay before this commission. Again, we express our gratitude for this opportunity. We also express our love for thee and for thy Son, Jesus Christ. and pray that this love may fill each of us as we work together and striving to make this wonderful community a better place to live. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Please join me in the pledge. Thank you. There, that's good. Next on the agenda is roll call. Roll.
Commissioner Nolte?
Here.
Commissioner Withington?
Here.
Commissioner Lawson?
Here.
Commissioner Wagner?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Very good. Next on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion on this evening's agenda? Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Move to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion's been made for approval of tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized and closed.
I close.
Call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Next on our agenda are public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to make any comments at this time? Please approach the podium and identify yourself, and then you may proceed. Go right ahead.
I'm really nervous. Wendy Herman, I'm coming as a citizen of Clay County. I saw that the opioid settlement was on for discussion tonight, so I wanted to come before you all instead of going to each of you individually. I'm not sure what is going to be discussed tonight, but what I would like to say is this topic is something I'm very passionate about. I myself think a parent of an addict should be on the committee. Who knows more than an expert than a parent dealing with it firsthand, or maybe even a recovering addict? They too would know things. I personally reached out to my kids' school district last year, maybe in September, to ask if they were going to have some kind of assembly about fentanyl, because at that point I had heard about rainbow fentanyl that looked like sweet tarts. I don't know if they ever had anything about it. My son was a middle schooler and he never mentioned it. They definitely need to talk about it more in the schools as far as what to look for and the signs of an overdose. I just wanted to give you something to think about. In my experience, maybe the money should go to help addicts get into treatment. Sometimes it is hard for an addict to get into a facility if they haven't met their deductible. So maybe helping with that would be an option, because I don't know too many addicts that have a couple $1,000s laying around. Personally, my deductible is $3,000. Another option could be, if they can't find something around here, they might need to fly out of state. They don't pay for plane tickets anymore. A plane ticket could be standing in the way of someone getting help. Once getting clean, they need to move on to a sober living facility, and that is a cost that they would need, and they can't work when in rehab. So with helping with a couple weeks' rent or month could help someone get on their feet. Therapy is needed, and that's not cheap for them. Maybe helping with rides to meetings or work would help. There also needs to be either some more meetings for the families as a support, or more information out there about where you can find such meetings. I know about all of these issues because I have 2 children who are addicts, and we've ran into each one of these problems. I've seen so many young people die from this disease. I just came from a funeral today burying my cousin who died of an overdose. And if it wasn't so hard to get help, people would probably seek it more. So unless you or someone you know has been through any of this, it's really hard to imagine. I probably wouldn't know anything if I hadn't been through it, and I have to deal with it on a daily basis. Another thing that doesn't help is the judgment people have with this. People need to remember addicts are people too, and I'd be willing to bet that not one of them woke up one morning and said, I want to be an addict. I could go on, but it's hot, so I just want to thank you for listening and throw this out here before you discussed it.
Thank you. And by the way, as it is a discussion item, you are certainly free to contribute to that discussion when that comes up on the agenda as well, so don't feel like you are only limited to this one statement.
Right.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to make any comments? Seeing none. That brings us to our consent agenda. Administrator?
The consent agenda allows the commission to act upon items considered to be routine and approved in one motion. These may include items that have been reviewed by the commission in a prior session. There will be no separate discussion unless a commissioner requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. This afternoon, we have 2 items on the consent agenda. The commission meeting minutes from May 10th, the 6 o'clock meeting, and also Resolution 2023-234, approving invoice payments for Clay County from June 27th to July 7th for 195 invoices totaling $324,397.37.
Okay. If there are no requests from commissioners to separately take up one of those issues, I will be entertaining a motion to accept the consent agenda. Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Move to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Excuse me. Motion has been made for the acceptance of the passage of our consent agenda. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
Close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes,
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
That brings us to our regular agenda. The first item on this evening's regular agenda is 2023-235. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-235 is approving invoice payments for Clay County Prosecutor's Office from June 27th to July 7th for 15 invoices totaling $15,350.60.
Any questions of the administrator? Seeing none, Commissioner Wagner?
Yes. Move to approve 2023-235.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2023-235. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
Close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
yes,
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes. I'm sorry, I recuse myself.
Motion passes 5 in favor, 1 recusal.
It's the heat. Next on next on our regular agenda, and the last item on the regular agenda for this evening is 2023-236. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-236 is approving commission meeting dates and time changes to Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. beginning August 2nd.
I believe that was introduced by Commissioner Thompson, so I will get to you right afterwards, but as it's her, she's the maker of the resolution. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Commissioner. I actually have an amendment to this in changing it from 7 p.m. starting at 6 p.m. in replace. And I think we've had a lot of conversation and discussions on this, and if anyone else wants to add anything, I'm happy to turn my microphone over to them.
Okay, we now have, there's been a motion to amend 2023-236 to change the start time from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. Did you have anything further you wanted to say on that, Commissioner Thompson?
No.
Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close?
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
yes,
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Amendment passes 6-0.
That brings us to what is now 2023-236 as amended. Commissioner Thompson, would you like to add anything before we open it up for discussion? Commissioner, okay. Is there any discussion on this item? I've got a couple of things I'd like to point out, and I'll just make them for whatever they're worth. We had a meeting last night of planning and zoning. It started at 6:30. It ended at 10:30, as Commissioner Lawson will certainly attest to, having been present at that time. It was a long agenda. It went for quite a long time, and even at that, we ended up knocking off the last agenda item because we just ran out of time. Point being, these meetings, whether they begin at 6 or 7 or whatever, can stretch into some very long periods of time. That is something that I have some concerns about. Also, the other thing that I would like to at least put out there for consideration of the commission is we did a survey of employees. It came back with the sense I got from it, and of course it can be interpreted however anybody, would see fit, but what I picked up on was the employees were not necessarily in favor of these changes. We do want to make sure that we are the employer of choice. We do want to make sure that we take that into consideration. I'm not saying that as an absolute yes or no. I'm just saying I think that perhaps the discussions leading up to this point, I give a little bit more weight to the employees' concerns, but I think that's something that each commissioner has to weigh in their own minds, and whether or not how much weight that should indeed carry on this decision. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to have a vote on this thing, but because obviously I only vote in the case of a tie. But I think that is something that should be considered. Going back to the P&Z meeting, I would point out that the items that are heard at Planning and Zoning are going to make their way here. And so we are going to have, the experience that I have is a lot of the same people show up and say a lot of the same things, and well, they should. I would not discourage them because of the fact that it is a different deliberative body that they are in fact presenting to. I just point out that we will be, that is something that is coming up down the road, and something else that we should be considering. That's really about all I wanted to point out. Is there any further discussion on this issue? Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Well, I know when we first discussed this, I basically said I've got Thursday free now, so I can do it, so I won't back off of that. But what I will at least recognize, because it just happened to me yesterday. Yesterday I had a wonderful 12-hour day at work myself, and the likelihood that I will make up some of that time is probably pretty remote. And so I do want to at least put out there that there should at least be some recognition that trading hours isn't necessarily easy in these sorts of positions. And I would like for us to just be cognizant, should this pass and we move forward, to be aware if that assumption of being able to trade hours is happening, because one can burn out after a few of those long days. But as it is, I said I could do it, I'll stick to that, but I do want us to be cognizant that of how this transpires over time. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none. The motion has been made, so you are recognized to have any closing statements.
I close.
And Commissioner Wagner, you made the motion, correct?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
I just said my piece. A fan I know should agree with that. But I can't.
Is there a motion to pass 2023-236 as amended?
Move to approve 2023-236 as amended.
Very well. With that, any further discussion? Seeing none,
I close.
please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
That completes our regular agenda. That brings us to discussion items. First item on our discussion is commission board seats on Clay County EDC. If you would like to go ahead and introduce that, Administrator, then I will recognize, I believe Commissioner Withington is the commissioner who suggested this, so I will let you go ahead and set it up and then recognize Commissioner Withington.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do appreciate that. This should be a familiar item to the commission as it was discussed and acted upon at last week's meeting. But I'd like to give a little bit of background and clarification, because I believe in my statement of introducing this item last week, I misspoke and contributed to possibly some confusion with regard to the number of seats that the commission has with the EDC. I had said, which was that the EDC had agreed upon all the changes in the contract, especially when it came to the reporting aspect. They had not changed their bylaws, and they were not increasing the seat on the executive committee, but I said they were increasing the seat on the board of directors, and that was not correct. And certainly, as you heard from the speakers from the EDC that were here last week, they were very clear in the aspect of what their counter proposal was that they had not increased and not moved and made any changes to their bylaws. So I want to clarify how many seats we have on the EDC. So according to the bylaws and their proposal that was agreed upon is the executive board member by their bylaws is the presiding commissioner. The commission also has 3 commission seats on the board of directors. Now, in the past, we've only had 3 commissioners prior to this January. So whenever the service agreement was approved with the EDC, the commission never made any decisions about who sits on the board of directors because we had 3 seats and we had 3 commissioners. Now that we have more representation and 7 commissioners, then my suggestion is as we go forward and every year when the commission approves an agreement with the EDC, there should be a companion resolution in which the commissioners would then decide who are the 3 commissioners that sit on the board of directors. And so where we are today is presiding commissioner is on the executive committee, and the board of directors, the 3 that have been on the board of directors has been the presiding commissioner, Commissioner Carpenter, and Commissioner Thompson. But as the commission is well aware, several months ago, the commission also made a decision to place another commissioner on the board of directors, and that's Commissioner Withington. So now we have 4 commissioners and 3 seats on the board of directors. In discussion with the presiding commissioner, because in the past, again, 3 seats, 3 commissioners, and the presiding on the executive, the presiding commissioner were on both boards, the board of directors and the executive committee. Presiding commissioner is stepping down from the board of directors position of one of the 3 commissioner seats. So that would leave at this point in time, the 3 commissioners are Commissioner Withington, Commissioner Carpenter, and Commissioner Thompson. That's where we are today, and I wanted to provide that clarification. I think Commissioner Withington asked me to also put this item on the agenda because I think he wanted to also bring forward and have some discussion about how does the commission go about deciding who are those commissioners on the board of directors. So at this point, I would turn it over, I think, to Commissioner Withington for his point of discussion, and then I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, apologize for any confusion that I contributed to.
Commissioner Withington, you are recognized to start the discussion.
All right, yeah, so I was just wanting to have a conversation on how we choose those 2 extra, or I guess 3 extra board of directors. I would like to see us as a board actually make that decision. And after talking with both Commissioners Thompson and Carpenter, it sounds like they're both ready to step off. And I would just like to put out there that I would like to see Joanne and Commissioner Lawson and Commissioner Johnson on the board of directors. So.
Getting ready to talk in the microphone that really isn't working overly well. I just want to point out that my allowing, stepping back on this is basically got 2 contingencies. One is that it does not involve a change in the bylaws, and secondarily, that both EDC and Commission agree on that. I am willing to abide by whatever common agreement comes from the Commission and the EDC on this matter. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to
Well,
move
this,
forward.
no one's mentioned changing the bylaws here tonight. So, I mean.
No, I did. I did.
The board of directors, but if you're going to say that if we make a motion next year to have the EDC update their bylaws to not allow or to not have just the presiding, but to have a member of this board selected for the executive, does that mean you're not going to step down?
I'm addressing specifically the matter before us, which is this year's agreement.
Yeah, we've already approved
No,
it, Jerry.
I know that, but I wanted to make sure that it was said.
Well, I mean, I don't know why it has to be said if it's already been approved.
Well, I think, I hope that I'm allowed to make comments that I
Well,
think
no,
are
I know,
relevant.
but I mean, no one's trying to pick a fight. No one's trying to rehash what happened last week. I mean, we've already voted to approve that. It's done with. Tonight, we're addressing 2 board of director seats.
Further discussion. Commissioner Johnson. I just said Commissioner looking at you. For the audio, I need to remember to use names as well.
That's all
Sorry.
right. So they're not proposing any bylaw changes. Is that correct, the EDC?
That is correct.
Because right now-
Their current bylaws state that on the executive committee, it is the presiding commissioner. That position is ex officio with voting of power. It also says for their board of directors, they have 39 members. Of those 39 members, 35 of them are elected members from their organization. 4 of them are ex officios with voting power. And of those 4, 3 of them are commissioners.
That's not exactly how it's written.
Well, you're correct. It says all commissioners.
It says all the commissioners of the county of Clay shall be ex officio voting members. So the way the bylaws are written, we're all on that commission. We're all on the board. Thank you, David. Appreciate that.
It does complicate it in that it does say
Right.
all commissioners, and again, at the time,
Yeah.
it was when there were 3. But it also says their maximum is only 39 members unless they amend their bylaws. So David and I have had the conversation about they probably need to clean up the language in this portion of their bylaws.
Or kick 4 people off so we can fill those positions.
Be sure and identify yourself before you speak.
David Slater, Clay EDC. I apologize. When the new commission went to 7, we should have addressed the bylaws. That's on me. And I apologize, but the bylaws do say 39 members and 3 seats for the county
So the
commission.
understanding is how our administrator just explained it then. 3
Yes.
3 board members and 1 executive board member.
Yes,
So 4 total from the
the
commission.
exec board is separate from the regular, the exec board also are members of the full board.
Yeah.
And so the presiding commissioner
Okay.
has a seat on the exec board, and we always had, when you had the 3, putting him on the full board also.
Okay.
But because of the way it's written, I've got no issues with you selecting 3 people amongst yourselves to be your representatives on the board.
And so the way it stands right now, Administrator, is that Jerry's on the executive board, Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Carpenter, Commissioner Withington are right now on the general board.
That is the way it stands right now, and part of it is, it's a carryover with Commissioner Carpenter and Commissioner Thompson.
Yeah.
And as I said, historically, the commission has never taken action on those 3 seats because there's never been a need to make a choice. Now, expanding the commission to 7, the commission needs to take some kind of formal action, which I would suggest, whatever the outcome is, we'll bring forward a resolution so we have that documentation and, not let anything slip through the cracks next year when we renew the contract. The commission would then decide who are those 3 members on the board of directors.
So currently, right now, if Commissioners Carpenter and Commissioner Thompson are willing to give up their seats, would now be an appropriate time to fill those seats?
Absolutely. Well, what I would suggest is if you would give us, if that's what's to happen tonight, if there could be consensus by the board, then I would suggest I would come back next week with an actual resolution, just like we did with Commissioner Whittington. He is by resolution identified by this board, and so we would want to clean that up and do it by resolution. Now, I understand that their board of directors, their next meeting is not till,
September.
so
The fourth
waiting
Wednesday
another
in
week to
September.
formalize whatever you decide to do tonight will not have an impact on the next board of directors.
By the way, I don't know how this fits into our Constitution as far as the nominating ability of the presiding commissioner, but I will certainly commit at this moment to when that resolution comes up, whether it's next week or not, I will certainly take whatever advice the commission wishes to give me and put those names in nomination. The reason I say that is I don't know how that affects the structure of the Constitution until I get instruction from council. If council says that's not necessary, that's fine, but I feel like I need to preserve whatever the structure is in the Constitution, and I will abide by whatever ruling the county council comes up with as far as that particular issue goes. Commissioner Withington.
Yeah, so I brought up Commissioner Johnson and Lawson. You live in the Western District, I live in the Western District. That's 2 Western, 2 Eastern. That's why I came up with their names. So that way, the whole county would have equal representation.
Right, and of course, when we had 3, there was a Western and an
Yeah.
Eastern commissioner, so that was not an issue.
Yeah.
Now it is,
And that's
obviously.
why I meant that, and I'm just saying, that's why I brought their names up. So that way, there would be equal representation between the East and the West.
Okay. By the way, before we leave this, I would like to get consensus from the commission that those 3 names you mentioned are in fact the consensus of the commission. That being the case, I would be happy to put those names in nomination for the anticipated resolution. Commissioner Lawson.
The only thing I wanted to say was, as I read the Constitution, and by no means am I a legal person, but the way, I'm legal, but I'm not a legal expert. Let's get that straight right now. But the bottom line is this. I thought that the Constitution made the determination that if it is a county board, then you have the power. But it doesn't specifically dictate how that's handled if it is a board, which this isn't a county board, in my opinion. I don't know if that's correct.
No, I do take your point. My point is this. I am also not a lawyer or a legal person. I think when it comes to acting within the Constitution, I always feel a little bit better getting a legal opinion, even if I think I know what it says. I prefer to be able to say, the attorney, counselor said we could do this, and that way it takes the heat off me a little bit. Further discussion. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, just want to affirm, totally support whoever wants to be on the board. I don't have much of an opinion. I think the 2 commissioners suggested are fantastic. If anybody else wants it, that's great too. And yeah, I think it'll be a good move, and hope you all enjoy the role. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson, did you wish to be recognized? Okay, is there any further discussion? Before we leave discussion, Commissioner Withington, go ahead and give us those 3 names one more time. I would like to get at least head nods to that is in fact.
There's only 2 names.
No, I'm sorry, please. Well, just go ahead and name all 3. That way we've got them. But yeah, 2 names is fine. However you want to work it. But I want to get head nods or a consensus.
So, according to the bylaws, you're on the executive board. According to Administrator Diana, I'm on the general board because we passed that resolution. So the other 2 seats I would like to nominate or put out there, Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Lawson, so that way the Eastern District has 2 representatives, just like the Western District.
Okay, I'm just going to go around the table, and I realize that we have audio recordings too, but I just want to make sure everybody is okay before we instruct staff. Okay? Okay. I have, through nonverbal signs, gotten a unanimous consent to instruct the staff to go ahead and prepare along those lines. If is that clear instruction?
It's very clear instruction. I would like to also do a clarification in that I will be adding Commissioner Withington's name to that resolution, because the prior resolution also talked about the executive board, in which we named Commissioner Withington, and that is not the case because the bylaws didn't change. So just for accuracy, historical purposes, all 3 names will show up on that resolution.
that was kind of what I was driving, and I didn't want to necessarily get into a debate about. That's why I wanted to say, have staff go ahead and make it, put it together in proper form, which I'm sure you're able to do. Commissioner Withington.
I just, are you fine with all this?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with y'all. Okay.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to,
Commissioner
I was
Carpenter's
just
on
getting ready
our
to
Finance
recognize.
board, so that's pretty good representation.
Excuse me. Yeah, Mr. Slater, you're, okay. Is there anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
No, I just want to continue working with the county commission. Let's drive this thing. We're better as a team.
Very good. If there are any, I don't know if there are any other comments. I think we've given staff instruction. Commissioner Withington, would you like to close the discussion?
Yeah, I close.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate
so
it.
the contract will be approved next week if the vote goes?
The contract is approved at the last meeting. So we will get that to you to sign, and then, because typically we have the other party sign, and then the commissioner will sign. And so, yes, it is for
ready to
this
sign.
year, the contract is approved.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Great.
We'll arrange a time to sign it. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to our next discussion item, which is Land Development Code update from Planning and Zoning. Administrator, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, this is a project that staff has been working on for a period of time with our Planning Commission. And so we've asked Director Jones to come here to give a brief presentation to the commissioners about where we are with the update to the Land Development Code.
Mr. Jones, have you not had enough talking going on the last 24 hours?
This is going to be really quick. Kip Jones, Planning Director. So just wanted to give a real brief update. We are working on probably the biggest revision of the Land Development Code. I think it achieves three things. It aligns the Land Development Code with the state statutes for first-class counties. The board will remember that the Planning and Zoning Commission has changed, as well as the BZA. So now we're changing the code to match those state statutes. Also, we're working on creating additional procedures that will streamline the process depending on the type of case. And we're refining certain code sections that would meet the changes in unincorporated Clay County. So to give you a little bit of more detail, and at this point we don't have all the details because it's been heard at one Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It was supposed to be heard last night, was not. So it was continued to the August meeting. And my expectation would be that it's heard at least August, maybe even September, and we'll have something in front of the County Commission either late August or late September. So currently we have basically two processes that our cases go through. It's a minor subdivision and a major subdivision. But right now, all of our cases go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and County Commission. They all follow that same process. Now, if it's a major subdivision, it has to go through that process twice. What we are proposing, working with County Council, is to create a third process, which you can see as the administrative process, which would create a streamlined process where staff could approve certain cases. So they'd still have to plat the property most likely, but it would not include public meetings. We would still reach out to neighbors, but that would take the timeline from 3 to 4 months to maybe a month and a half on certain cases. And we're talking about those cases where we don't generally have opposition. It could be a 1 or 2 lot subdivision where somebody's dividing 5 or 10 acres for their child to build a house. To meet that process, it would have to be meet all the land development code and comp plan and meet a certain list of stipulations. Then we're proposing to still have the minor subdivision. That would include larger developments, but not developments with interior streets, and those would just go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So again, a streamlined process, but this one may have some more public comment or possibly some opposition, so there's that public meeting that would be included. And then the third one would be the major subdivision, which is generally the subdivisions with interior streets. Those are the controversial items that would follow our normal process, which would be Planning and Zoning Commission and County Commission like they do now. Now, just a little more additional information. Like last night we had 3 conditional use permits. Those would be kind of divided into 2 cases. If they're conditional use permit renewals, like for instance, Carolyn's Pumpkin Patch that's been operating for years, hasn't had violations, then that could possibly be reviewed and approved by staff if there are no violations and there are no major changes. However, if it's a CUP for like a cell tower then that's going to follow our normal process where it would go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and come to the County Commission for approval, so those neighbors have a chance at a public meeting to make their comments. This amendment would also align the BZA with the 3 county commissioners as it is currently. It would make staff responsible for that 1,000-foot adjoiner list rather than the applicant, which is how the code states now. It's just easier for us to do that for the applicant. We're proposing to change certified mail to regular mail. We think more people will get the regular mail because nobody signs for the certified, or the post office a lot of times doesn't even require that they sign for the certified ever since COVID. It would be a minor change to extending a waiting period for a rezoning and a conditional use permit from 6 months to a year. And then with any of these processes, if the applicant is aggrieved by the decision of the administrative or the Planning and Zoning Commission, they could choose to appeal to the County Commission. So there is an appeal process. Now, we are still working this out. This is just kind of the preliminary thoughts. This is where we're hoping to get, but wanted to let you know that we are working on this, and that at hopefully August, September, this will come in front of the County Commission. So I would be happy to answer any questions, but only like 1 or 2 questions. That's it. So.
By the way, thank you once again for the hours that you put in, you and your staff, and also for last night's meeting, including county staff. It was a long day, and certainly appreciate your work. On the first option, where you're talking about the administrative action, would an example of what's being contemplated on that be a citizen has a large tract of land that they would like to subdivide and say give part of it to a relative, which is a fairly common thing. Is that the kind of a case that you would see falling into the administrative path?
Yes. So first, yes, I have a very good staff, so they did a good job last night. And second, yes, it would be a certain number of lots, maybe 1 or 2 lots that they would be subdividing that would have to meet the comprehensive plan and the land development code for it to be considered as an administrative process.
Very good. Commissioner Johnson.
First of all, Mr. Jones, thank you very much. I appreciate this. Efficiencies in government is very important to me, and streamlining things for our customers is very important, and this is very good. I like this. 2 questions I have. One, in the administrative process, let's say you do not approve something, you deny something in that process. Is there an appeal that they can go through?
Yes. Initially, we think that appeal would come to either the Planning and Zoning Commission or County Commission.
Perfect. And secondly, is there any way that a sheriff's shooting range can go through just the administrative process?
I don't think that kind of case would qualify with the public input we had last night.
Save us a lot of time.
I'm not even going to look over at the sheriff. I can't look that way.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Wagner.
Well, it's hard to top that question, but so I'll go in an entirely different direction. First of all, Kip, thanks for the work. On the major subdivision, my only question is concerning locations of major subdivisions, and my feeling is those really belong close to locations where they may ultimately be annexed to provide city services. Is that the direction? You're kind of hopping like, I must be onto something here, but complete that thought.
So that is one of my biggest concerns with the current comprehensive plan, because right now the county's divided into 3 tiers. The area around the cities is in the urban services tier. That's where the current comprehensive plan calls for the major subdivisions. However, that area is massive. It's from Liberty and Kansas City city limits all the way north of 92 Highway. I'm hoping with us redoing the comprehensive plan or updating it, that will be a more specific area where it's much closer to city limits. We get that city's input, and it's not such a large area where we have a subdivision here that's surrounded by ag zone land that's on a private sewer system with 1 acre lot. So I'm hoping we're gonna get away from that with the new comp plan.
No, well, that's good. And I guess as a follow-up to that end, are we getting that input from the cities to kind of give us a feel for, here is their 10 to 20 year growth plan that then these sorts of things fit into?
Yes, so we will, and I don't want to speak outside of my terms here, but we will give you an update on the comprehensive plan as well. But included in that update the outside firm is meeting with all the cities in Clay County, so yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Further discussion? Commissioner Withington, do you have any? I hadn't gotten your attention, I just wanted to see.
My question is going to be about annexation and making sure that we are in subdivision business. I don't think the county should be in subdivision business. So we need to make sure that those are executed, municipalities, so they can get annexed.
Actually, Commissioner Withington, you've hit on one of my favorite concerns, and that is, in my opinion, and it sounds like you share that opinion, that the county government is the incorrect instrument to administer services better rendered by city government. Very good. Any further discussion or questions? So thank you. Let us know as it comes up, and we will be certainly looking forward to the work product of the Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you.
That brings us to opioid settlement, and that would be Administrator for a discussion. And we appear to have a PowerPoint.
Thank you. Commissioners, yes, just a brief PowerPoint. You may recall, it's been maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago that we had some preliminary discussion about the creation of an opioid settlement task force. Commission gave some great direction about how to modify that particular task force. I might have been a little overzealous in the request of the task force to be in existence for 18 years. And so you all had some really great insight to that. So what I'd like to do is just kind of briefly go through what are the things that have been changed sort of in the proposed charter for the task force, and still get some input from the commission on a couple of items. So really nothing new. You saw this slide last time. I will say, since we spoke last time, we have received one of the payments for this year under the column heading number 3. We've received, I believe, the Janssen for the $33,000. So we have approximately right now in this fund just shy of $200,000. We are anticipating to get the other distribution, the $52,000, anytime for the remainder of the year. The other piece we still do not know, and we've not received any information yet, is how much funding are we going to get from the retail businesses. So what I'm showing you is what we know. We think there will be some additional funding. We just don't know what that is. Now, this slide is different. We've added this since we spoke last time to you. We've received actual information with regard to the annual allocations we are to get from the 2 settlements that we know of. So you can see here what we have to date is slightly less than $200,000. We're also still expecting that final payment that's to come in from the one that's missing. And then what you see here is the annual income coming in 2024, 25, 26. And so you can see that it starts diminishing, which they did tell us that they were front-loading the annual amounts. So in 2027, it's about $75,000. It jumps up in 28 to about $87,000, $90,000 a year right in here, and then it starts dropping down into where the income is about $65,000 a year from those 2 settlements that we know. Again, we know that there's some additional settlements out there. We just have not been informed at this point in time how much we will be getting. So with that said, nothing has changed with regard to how the funds can be used, either treatment or prevention, and then there is sort of an other strategies category for first responders training, research, leadership, and development. This was in the presentation last time about what are some of the approved strategies that can be used, including medication-assisted treatment, treatment for incarceration, prevention programs. So the list goes on and on about what these funds can be used for. So what I did after listening to the commission the last time I was here is scale back the scope of the work for the task force. So really what we're going to be asking the task force members to do is come together, talk about what they feel the challenges and the information that they have about the crisis here in Clay County, and recommend to this commission what programs would they recommend, and what do they believe the goal or the success in contributing to that particular project, what do they believe the outcome would be? That would really be the extent of the task force. So again, they'd establish goals, they come to the commission, they would basically propose to you all projects that meet the criteria, what they believe the outcomes would be, and then once the commission actually adopted a program, the task force would then be disbanded. That would be the role that they would have. So again, not 18 years worth, probably several months of work. So the question I think that becomes, because I think that's really what the commission wanted, is to hear from stakeholders, what are programs, what are recommendations, what do we think the benefit to the community would be, depending on what you all picked, and then you all would pick what the program is going to be. The question becomes, who is the task force? And so on the left are the original 7 categories that were proposed in the task force. Now, that night, we also heard from, I believe, Commissioner Withington wanted to make sure that there was someone on there that had the perspective of prevention. The other thing we heard this evening from one of our residents and one of our employees, that it may be beneficial to also have someone that has had some personal experience with dealing with some of the challenges with the opioid crisis. I also mentioned to you all the last time that there is an existing county opioid committee that was formed, I want to say, last year. And I think, according to the health department, Gary was actually the individual that kind of got the group together. And so you see here in the blue box, the current task force, which Sheriff Aiken is on that task force, and he's here this evening, so he might be able to give some insight into that particular committee. The Director of Public Health, Liberty Hospital, North Kansas City Hospital, Tri-County Mental Health. We have a physician from a family practice, and then we also have an RN that is the instructor with the Northland CAPS. So that is a group that is already in existence and does meet periodically. They have set some goals, my understanding is last year, and they meet periodically to talk about what's going on in the county and how those goals are being met. So the question really for the commission is, we have an existing group that has been meeting and talking about the crisis. Is there interest in using this committee and maybe adding to it from their task of looking at recommendations to the commission for the settlement funds, or would you prefer to do a separate group?
I'll go ahead and start off. I'm glad that you mentioned the idea of having someone who has a family connection. I think that is not without precedent, in that among other boards and commissions that we have, DDRB actually requires a certain number of members who have a family member who has a developmental disability. So I think that is not only a good precedent, but I think it would be a good practice for this particular board. At this moment, and I could easily be persuaded by, by certainly other, as the debate goes on, you had mentioned that there would be a finite timeline as contemplated on a one that came out by the commission. We have no authority to either extend or to end the current county opioid committee. I think there is some virtue in bringing some of those members over if they are interested and having them serve concurrently. But what occurs to me is we're talking about expending county funds. I think if we're going to ask for advisors, I think it probably is more fiscally responsible if we appoint those members. And as you say, once that board has served its purpose, we have the option of either allowing it to sunset, or if we see fit to extend it. I think that's probably an awfully good way to go, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, whether there will be future monies coming out of some other level of government to help deal with this problem. So I like the idea that we would have a structure that was, in fact, the county's structure. Commissioner Lawson.
Thank you. I would very much like to ask that we do put someone on the board that has a very personal feeling about this whole thing. And I think it brings it down to the base level. Oftentimes, when you're dealing with some of these physicians and people that are of a higher level and see it in the bigger picture, I don't think that they have quite the hands-on that somebody that had to live through that pain and agony would have. So I'd very much like to see maybe we have two people that have gone through something like this that would be willing to serve, that are our own, if you will. I think it would make it, and it's somebody that kind of can keep them on track, and then it's somebody that can report back and what's going on, and can come to the
Commissioner,
commission.
would you be open to using similar language that we use on the DDRB board to define degree of relation and all that? That way we don't reinvent the wheel. Does that make sense?
I think that's a great board, and people that I've known, that had the disability and served on the board, they brought it down to the base level, and that was something that was desperately needed.
I agree with you. It's
So,
important input.
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and I tend to agree with our colleague on this because when we did the prescription drug monitoring ordinances in Kansas City and Jackson County, one of the strongest proponents of it were those who had relatives and brothers, sons and daughters who had overdosed because of the abuse of some of of prescription drugs. And how those were fostered. So I certainly think that makes total sense. I will put in that reminder, even though it looks like a lot of money, it's not really a lot of money. And so I think it's important that whoever serves on this task force understands that it probably makes the most sense to figure out where can we be most impactful with those dollars. But certainly, as was mentioned in our public comments, individuals face many aspects of this issue and hopefully can give some strong advice as to where those dollars can be most impactful. I do recognize, along with the presiding commissioner, that you do have a lot of overlap there, but I too agree that it makes sense that this is a process that we push forward. And part of that reason, and maybe this is an opportunity for the sheriff to speak to this, but it really seems to me that this is the sort of thing that will have and has the potential for a lot of public engagement. And I'm not sure under the current structure through the health department that you have that, where I think what we really need is that to help us decide where do we put our emphasis. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you. First, on the existing board, does it have a timeline in terms of how long it continues for?
Honestly, I do not believe so. Let me pull up my notes from our health director, but I don't think they have term limits. I don't think it has an expiration.
And it is organized under the health department?
According to the director of our health department, yes, but I've only had conversations with him, and I know the sheriff has been part of that also, so he may be able to shed some light on what they do and how frequently they meet and what their purpose is.
Sure, yeah, happy to get that information if the...
Mr. Sheriff?
Yeah.
Thank you, Will Aiken, Sheriff of Clay County. The members that are on the right side of the screen, those are members that just got together and said, we need to do something more than what we're actually doing right now. This actually happened as a result of the Northland CAP students putting together a survey of all the feeder schools from middle and high schools into the Northland CAPS program. And they found out of 800, and don't quote me on the numbers, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head off of a presentation that I heard almost 2 years ago. Out of 800 students surveyed, they asked them, how many of you know what fentanyl is? And it was overwhelming. It was like 85–90% of the students knew what fentanyl was. Only 14% knew what Narcan was, and less than 5% knew how to get their hands on Narcan. And so when they presented that to the leadership program for the Northland Regional Chamber of Commerce, which was my class, those of us who saw the presentation, we got together and we said we need to get together and find out what we need to do more of. The sheriff's office and law enforcement, we're the enforcers. We're going to enforce the law. We're going to find the people who are pushing the drugs, but that is only one piece of the entire pie. The column on the left, the only suggestions I would have for consideration is the legal profession, more specifically the prosecutor's office. All right, because each one of those entities have legal counsel that they can go to and say, hey, this is what we would like to do. How do we do this? So as far as making sure that the prosecutor's office is on board, I would change that. But then to Commissioner Lawson's point, what we didn't have was individuals with lived experience. And I would highly recommend more than one, two. I mean, I would highly recommend against having a large committee, right? Because when you have a large committee, nothing gets done. But having that lived experience is going to be crucial because, yeah, we make decisions based off of our occupation, but you don't have the input from lived experience. And that would be crucial for this effort. So for the ones on the right, no, we were just doing it because it's a part of our responsibility. So there's no term limits, nothing like that.
Yeah, no, gotcha. Thank you. And first of all, let me just absolutely agree that we ought to put one or two people who have direct lived experience with it. I think there's all kinds of reasons to do that, but one of them is that I think one of the perspectives we're likely to hear is how difficult it is when you have a family member or a friend or whoever, how difficult it is to find them treatment that is available, that has beds open, that's affordable. We don't do a very good job in this country of making those services available to people on a timely basis and on an affordable basis. And so I think that they can bring that important perspective to how we can utilize these funds. Question quickly for the sheriff is, if we modify the existing group or change it in a significant way, is that, in your view, is that going to cause any problems with the folks who serve on the existing board, or is that a thing that will be understood? And
No, I mean, I think it aligns pretty much same. The only difference that I see that really sticks out is Northland Caps. That was just the group that was, Barb, she was there to help us because the students were involved. I think if we move to the official membership, that we could probably leave Northland Caps out, but definitely include them because they have students who need internship and experience to survey, and I mean, they're a valuable asset. One more thing that I would definitely add on the left side is school district representation.
Yeah.
It's on there.
There's one.
Oh my gosh, I completely overlooked that. Okay. I was like, where are the schools at? Okay, that's all I had.
Gotcha, yeah. And so creating a new board, you don't see that being some kind of competition with the existing board or any issues there. It would be okay to create a new board as a existing board member.
Like I said, it looks like it aligns. The only caveat I would put in there is I don't know how often the requirement is going to be for the board to meet. So, like the sheriff's office, the sheriff, I mean, definitely not me, but a representative from the sheriff's office or his designee. So that way we can actually have someone there in the event that there's a conflict in scheduling and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just say, look, I think creating some kind of task force makes sense. I think having a couple of people on there with actual lived experience makes a tremendous amount of sense, and I appreciate the bravery of speaking to that earlier. There are at least a few that I see, in terms of how big of a, to the sheriff's point, obviously if you get too big of a task force, maybe it dilutes it a bit. But if we're going to add a couple of folks, he mentioned, the CAPS person, wouldn't necessarily have to carry over. Makes sense to me on the legal profession to have somebody from the prosecutor's office. One of the things we talked about last time on this was just my desire to not have the end result be dividing the funds up to such a degree that that they don't do much good anymore. And so, I think getting a couple of family members can help perhaps ensure that. Yeah, I think those are my thoughts for now, but look, would like to hear other people's thoughts on it.
I agree with Commissioner Carpenter in that perhaps somebody in the legal profession from the prosecutor's office or possibly someone attached to the drug courts might be a good option. Something I noticed about the current one is it is, with the exception of the sheriff, it is all medical folks. I think the problem goes beyond that, thus the other people. We do not have the authority. We could request that they put members on, but we have no authority over the existing board. That is not under the authority of the commission. I think one other thing that might recommend a commission board is the requirements we have for ethics and rules. These people that they're listed on there are beyond question on their ethics. However, we are dealing with public money. So that is something that occurs to me. So for what it's worth, further discussion.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
So are you looking for, specific direction in terms of the membership of the board tonight? Or?
Well, certainly if we could come to that conclusion, because to me, I think that's the hanging chad, to finalize the charter for this task force. And then we could start publicizing and, getting applications for people that might be interested to serve from these various areas. Now, some of them will probably certainly be outreach, who from the school district, who from the sheriff's office, who from the prosecutor's office. But, when it comes to from individuals that have personal experience, or, we'll put out feelers on the emergency medical services. So I guess I am kind of looking for, the type of representation you would like to see on the task force, and so that we could start getting where we could bring it forward. You would adopt the charter, and then we could actually start putting the task force together, because again, by the end of the year, we'll be, over, $230,000 that, could be out in the community, providing benefit to working towards this issue.
Gotcha, yeah. Yeah, well, so in my view, adding a couple of people with direct experience, and then to Commissioner Withington's suggestion of somebody from the prevention community, and in my view, we could take off the health department and the emergency medical services slots if we needed to open up slots for those additional folks. So yeah, that's my view.
I agree. I think adding 2 members does make sense. I think we should strive for an odd number in case of a vote so that there's a clear majority. I myself would be inclined to give deference to current Clay County Opioid Committee members to put on this particular board. That's just my view. So I think if we can I think 9 is a fairly manageable number. And I think the consensus from the commission, at least on this point, is 2 members from the community who have family members. Is that something we're all pretty much good with? Commissioner Johnson, I believe you wanted to be recognized.
Yes, Commissioner Carpenter mentioned emergency medical services and county health department. I believe taking those out. Tell me your thought, the difference between emergency medical services and the hospitals. Is emergency medical services, is that your firefighters, paramedics?
That would be the intent, but the same thing with, legal. We did broad categories to get input from the commission if you wanted to fine tune that, or if the sheriff has recommendations. I do think there could be some redundancy with emergency medical plus the hospitals, plus the sheriff's office that is also responding to, I'm sure, emergency situations. That could be a position that certainly may provide information from other members and not necessarily needed someone specific.
Yeah, if I could suggest, I agree with Commissioner Carpenter, but I would look at public health, the hospitals and emergency medical services, combine that into one, either an ER professional or a paramedic, who are the ones that actually deal with it more common than anybody else. As opposed to hospital staff, fentanyl addicts are not admitted to hospitals for very long, normally. So I would think that your first responders are going to have a lot more, first responders or ER personnel are going to have a lot more in the know about fentanyl addiction. Just my 2 cents, but I think the sheriff had something to say about it.
Sure.
So one of the challenges that we were facing was how many incidents were happening. We couldn't come up with an exact number. So the emergency medical services, the paramedics, they're the ones who were responding to the medical emergency, and then they would treat and then turn over to the hospital. But what we were trying to do is get reports, coinciding with services rendered while they were on their way to the hospital, and then what the hospital did. And so those were some of the statistics that we were trying to pull up, but we found that there were not a whole lot of numbers were being kept. And that really hurts us because the group on the right, we actually started this before we ever knew anything about the opioid settlement. And so we were just trying to find out how we can do this, and we were looking at grant opportunities. So we were trying to pull together numbers and such. Now, for law enforcement, we just respond. If it's a medical emergency, we stand by to make sure the scene's safe. We're not, unless we use some Narcan, give a dose or 2, maybe 5, like we have, at one point. Then we go back to public health and we say, hey, we need some more Narcan. They provide it because they were able to get it through grants. We absolutely need the public health department on this task force. And the reason why I say that is because we see opioid, but really we're talking about the fentanyl crisis. And that is a public health issue. We do our part to enforce the law. Emergency medical services does their part to respond to the medical emergency. Hospitals treat. So, I hope I heard wrong, maybe I didn't, but we definitely need public health on this task force. On that note, Gary Zabarak is the one who kind of spearheaded the unofficial task force. And he pulled us together based off of sidebar conversations with everyone. He said, you know what? This is an opportunity for all of us to come together and pull all of our resources together to see how we can proceed forward. And where we got stuck at was statistics.
I agree with your comments on Mr. Zabarak. I've discussed this issue with him, and I have confidence in him. Commissioner Withington, you want to be recognized.
Yeah, I want to make sure we have as many frontline people as possible on this. That's why I recommended treatment and recovery. But if we're going to have one hospital, how are we going to pick who's the hospital representative? Liberty, North Kansas City. Also, if we're going to have one school district, how are we going to pick North Kansas City, Kearney, Smithville? How's that going to happen?
Well, typically what we've done in the past when we work with school districts and want one representative, all the superintendents meet just like all the city county managers meet. And so typically we would talk to them and say, this is what we're trying to do, and leave it up to them. And they usually discuss, and somebody will volunteer, or so it comes out of that group that they'll decide among themselves I would not go to a particular school and just pick that school. We would go to, say, their organization and say, please help us. Please send us somebody. And they'll usually talk, and especially if we say we want somebody that's sort of in the trenches with the students, not administration. Yeah. I'm sure that they will come up with a name.
Okay. Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. It strikes me as I'm looking at that slide, there is a difference in approach. The one on the right suggests to me these are the professionals that are dealing with this sort of thing every day. How are they going to work together, work smarter, work with whatever resources they have? The group on the left is to make a determination of how we should be spending our money in the aggregate over time. Where do they feel like it should go? And quite honestly, I don't care who picks whom to go where as far as this task force goes, because I find it hard to believe that they would sit there in a vacuum and just make a decision. And I think that just gets to how we plan as staff to staff that committee and provide it the information they need to make a decision. I tend to agree that if we want a school district representative, they're all dealing with it. They're all talking to one another. They will probably have a recommendation as to who to send. I'm not going to worry about that because whoever does get picked will spread that information out to everybody else. What I do get concerned about is how we will then staff that group, and to the sheriff's point of just a moment ago, provide that group with actionable information that suggests to them what is a proper course of action, whatever they determine that to be. So, Administrator, if you can just kind of, I think you've spoken to this in the past, but if you could just reiterate how we intend to staff that group.
Well, we did, and so the liaison from staff to this task force will be the county administrator's office. The issue, though, is we are not the keeper of the data, of this type of data, as the sheriff mentioned. We are going to rely on these entities to help bring data forward about what is going on in the county.
And I appreciate that comment, because it also occurs to me that even if someone doesn't get picked to be one of the 9, there's a lot of folks that have information that'll be important for this group to know. And so whether they get to vote on ultimately what gets suggested to us, to me is neither here nor there. It is making sure the people who have the right information get to those who are going to make the recommendation, and I will rely on those folks and your office to make sure that that information does get there.
And I would say that in the charter, we do allow for the opportunity for the task force to create subcommittees. So they, among themselves, may choose to say, we need more data about XYZ. We don't have that, but these people do. So we're going to create a subcommittee. We'll go out and get those individuals. Members of the task force, including whoever the chair is, will be ex officio on those subcommittees. So we certainly are not restricting whoever serves on this task force that they have to have all the knowledge. They certainly have, under this charter, the ability to go forth and find more information if you believe that's pertinent to help you analyze and make a recommendation to the commission on what projects should be funded.
Just to muddy the waters a little bit more, I don't think anybody knows more about fentanyl addiction, the problems we have with our current system, the problems getting off that drug than a recovered fentanyl addict himself or herself. My suggestion would be, we talk about a couple of family members, is having one of those maybe even be a recovered addict, a recovered fentanyl addict. There's some insight there, and I have some personal knowledge myself, having friends that are recovered addicts, of a lot of insight that they can give, a lot of insight that they can give. Just a suggestion I'll throw out there. If you can
Yeah, I
find it.
think to write that definition of experience can be very broad in the aspect of it could be a family member dealing with challenges, or as you said, it could be someone who is recovering and can explain the challenges that they face and what could benefit them.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, the reason I suggested specific folks to pull off, because we're going to add several people on, is it was suggested that we don't want a task force that's too large. So if we're going to add several people on, obviously that would require taking people off. I've made my suggestions, and I'll be explicit about why. I would like to see the money go into directly helping people who are dealing with this issue, people who need help. And I do have the concern that I'll share again, which is that if you put, if the task force is primarily composed of folks from fire and paramedics and from first responders and from the health department, I think it increases the chances that the money just gets divided up a little bit to each entity, and we end up with the result that a little bit of money goes a lot of different places to each of the different groups. So my view is just that would not be the most effective way to spend the money. That's why I made the suggestions that I made. If we just want to increase the size of the task force and keep all those folks on and add additional people, that's fine with me as well. But yeah, that's why I made specific suggestions. And if somebody has other suggestions to remove, I would be open to hear those.
And if I could address that concern that maybe certain categories of members may focus on one aspect or one category of using the funds. If I recall during our last discussion, Commissioner Johnson asked that we, the task force, bring forward to you recommended projects in each category, right? So not all in prevention, not all in treatment, but to give you almost a menu of recommended programs and what the benefit would be, the potential benefit of, what we would, the goal of what we'd be trying to accomplish. And that would be presented to this commission. And so you all would then sort of have this menu to select from on what recommendations you want to do and what program you want to create. So that would be one of the things that I would be working with the task force to say, it can't be all in one category. There's multiple needs, and we want to see recommendations in prevention and in treatment and everything else.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think I have a slightly different view, but similar, which is what I recall Commissioner Johnson suggesting is that perhaps they make multiple suggestions, as in you could do A, B, or C, and then sort of leaving it up to the commission to pick A, B, or C, and having the ability of each of those options, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but having each of those options be able to sort of go all in one thing. If the task force, okay, maybe that is what you're saying. Thank you.
I think so. I think,
that that way we're not automatically going to be dividing up the money to so many different entities that it gets sort of neutered.
It's too diluted so that there's really not an impact, because I don't think that's what the commission wants to accomplish either.
That's right. So like I said, I've shared those concerns. It's just, I don't want this to be a thing where 20% goes to the health department and 20% goes to fire and 20% goes to the sheriff and 20% goes here and there. I'd rather figure out a way that we can really do something good with this money. Which is not to say that wouldn't do any good. It's just, adding a little bit of money to each of their respective budgets is not my optimal outcome for the task force. But if we just want to increase the size of it and not take anybody off, I'm fine with that too.
If it gives peace of mind, what we've been talking about over the last couple of years is not breaking it up like that. One of the things that we focused on, especially with the Sheriff's Office, was our drug education summit. And we would go to different houses of worship, schools, and present the education piece. But during the education piece, we would bring in community partners for prevention and services, and much like what we heard earlier today by one of our employees. We bring those partners in. So the discussions really is, yes, we recognize everyone needs something, but we're so limited on resources. And to Commissioner Wagner's point, this may sound like a lot of money, but this is a crisis. This is a fentanyl crisis. It's not going to be a whole lot of money. And so we recognized that, and we were coming together and we were like, okay, what are we doing? We need prevention, we need education, and so from the law enforcement side, whether we have money or not, we're going to continue to do the job. And if we don't have the money to do something, I'm going to come to you as the Clay County Commission and Sheriff, as opposed to the task force coming to you asking for money or to spend it one way or another specifically for law enforcement. Yeah. So that's kind of what we've been doing before, is like we just identify what is the most important collectively, and that was the direction we were going.
Thank you. Further discussion? I think this is the point where we ask, and I'm not sure, I want to go ahead, can you give us what you perceive as where we're going as commission and who we're trying to, what do you understand at this point? I think just kind of summarize. I think what seems to be the consensus, and this is a little more complicated than most of the time, that we do want probably 2 more members from the public who have family members involved. And correct me if I'm wrong, commissioners, but I'm thinking that 9 would be kind of a maximum number, otherwise we get unwieldy. Does that sound sort of where we're going? And I think as far as the makeup of the board members, how comfortable do you feel with the information you have at this moment, and what questions would you have from us to kind of sharpen our consensus if you need that to be done?
All right, so my takeaway would be that I think what I heard is for the legal profession, we'd like to narrow that down and make it someone from the prosecutor's office. That we want to add 2 members that have experience in capacity, and we'll come up with a definition for that and include that in the task force as we define the membership. Really, other than that, I think the categories that are here are, from discussion that's gone back and forth, I think bring value to the task force. So I would say we're probably going to recommend a 9-person task force. and basically changing legal profession to prosecutor and adding 2 individuals with personal experience. And making sure, as we kind of define them, that really our goal on these would be, and I don't want to say people in the trenches, but I think as you said, it's front line, right? So we're not necessarily talking about all administration. We're looking somebody who's working in the emergency room. We're talking about somebody who's really in the classroom with the children. And so I think that would be the goal that we would have.
Okay. Does that sum up what the commission would like to see up to this point? All right, I believe you, unless you have any further questions, I believe that will be the consensus of the commission.
Okay. We will bring back the charter for the commission to officially adopt, and then we'll start seeking and obtaining individuals interested in serving on the task force. Okay.
Thank you very much. That ends this part of our discussion. Next part and our final discussion point is KC TIF Commission. Administrator?
Pardon me. The commission may recall several meetings ago there was a discussion about the Kansas City TIF Commission. And so there has been an update on action that has taken place by the City Council of Kansas City. That information was shared with the commission by email. I believe that went out to all of you yesterday. Commissioner Nolte has information on that, and so he wanted to ensure that got to all the commissioners of sort of this status, and I believe you shared that they have proceeded and that the process of the reimbursable expenditures for the TIFs is in process now.
Right. I'm just going to go through this. I'll kind of go through it in bullet point form because we're getting close to the, we've been here for a bit. Obviously, any questions I'd be happy to try to answer. So the Councilman O'Neill sponsored an ordinance that went through the City of Kansas City. It passed. It defined some of the issues that we have here. It went to the TIF Commission. We had a TIF Commission meeting Tuesday. Essentially, what happened was this. The counsel for the TIF Commission interpreted that ordinance and gave us a brief discussion of it. And this was verbal. There was no written record here. So, excuse me. So he gave us a verbal. The gist of it was this, that the administrative board, which would be made up largely of the city, we would still have a commission member on there, but it would only be 1, not 2. So it would be basically 6 members of the mayor's choosing, commissioner from Clay, commissioner from Platte, school board members in another taxing jurisdiction would be on the administrative board. What they would be tasked with handling would be some of the more mundane tasks. In other words, approving certification of completion, and that sort of a thing. What he had said, what the council had said was the larger TIF Commission, the one that we have a greater participation in, would be handling matters like new TIF plans, amendments to TIF plans, those kinds of things, which seem to me to be really more the meat of the matter. Now, we only had a short time for discussion. It was 15 minutes total. I had a number of questions that I was asking council. But here's what it comes down to. As I said, I would really like to have a written summary of what you've just told us. I would like to have this in writing so we are all clear about how we are going forward. He said he would do that. At the time I get that written explanation from council, there may or may not be questions on our part. I would like to give that to the administrator and have that distributed to commissioners for any thoughts that they might have. So going forward, if that is the framework we are working under, that is something I think we should discuss, but I certainly find it more acceptable than I think where we originally looked like we were going. There was a representative there from the mayor's office who said the mayor was going to be not just this, but other boards and commissions, and he was going to be polling those members to see if they wish to continue service And the impression I had was that included, well, since it was at our meeting, that certainly was heavily implied, that included the TIF commissions, which means he would name his members for that commission. So that's kind of where we are at on that. I would like to get that in writing. I prefer the clarity of the written word in these occasions. And I would like that to be, to everybody look at it and make sure that they understand and certainly get their input. Also, I want to make sure this is given to our council and making sure that it is legal. So that may well resolve this particular situation. On the separate issue of the $6.9 million that was being, in my estimation, held hostage, but it was being held up for several months, that would be reimbursing expenses submitted by the developers. Those went through without a hitch, so that those monies are now being processed, and those reimbursements, those legitimate and approved reimbursements, will go forward. Should be next week is the general timeline. So that kind of, that gives you, I think, maybe an update of where we're at on that. Certainly, if there are any questions or any discussion, I'm open. Commissioner Johnson.
Okay, so I've read through this ordinance a couple times and I'm still confused by it. I don't really understand. So this is separate than the TIF board that we talked about prior, that the mayor's not filling those positions. Is it separate from
It's
that?
the same, you mean the administrative board as opposed to?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's put this administrative board together, and my original concern was that it was a workaround on using the actual TIF commission. It appears that that might not be the case, and I'm really not prepared to get too far down that road until I get some verification from a commission, that is to say TIF commission council on that. So yeah, it would basically be rerouting the more routine approvals through the administrative board, administrative committee, and then the one where we get 6 members and he would have 3, and then the other jurisdictions would have others, would handle the issues of new TIF plans, amendments to TIF plans, and issues like that that had more policy issues attached to them rather than procedural issues. Am I explaining that at all?
So just to be clear, this body will not make any decisions when it comes to new TIFs or anything like that?
Say that one more time, please.
This body that they're talking about here would not make any policy decisions or any decision when it comes to new TIFs?
My understanding is the administrative board would not be making, they would be simply procedural. But like I say, I really want clarification, because as you know, I share the confusion that you have. I am not very sure of this. That's why I want his written policy interpretation, and then I want to make sure that I run that past our county council to make sure that we are getting the best possible legal interpretation, so we know what it is they're doing.
And when you say procedural things that this new body would be doing, can you give me an example of what kind of procedural things?
XYZ developer has fulfilled a task that is reimbursable, and they submit a reimbursement request for X number of dollars. They would handle that sort of a thing, which generally speaking do not have very much in the way of discussion in those meetings. So it's stuff that does not necessarily have controversy. They either qualify or they do not.
So is this just a stopgap so that those developers that need to get paid will get paid without having the TIF commission filled by the mayor? Is that what
Well, you see, and that's another thing is I've heard both that this was a temporary expedient to get that backlog of reimbursements paid, but on the other hand, it reads like it's a permanent change.
Right.
So I really need, where we're getting into it beyond my depth as far as the legal interpretation of this, I want to get TIF council interpretation of it, because that is what TIF council, that is what the TIF commission will be operating under, is their advice from their council. So I want to get that, and that is essentially going to be what the rules of the road that they are going to be trying to work with.
But that roughly $7 million that wasn't paid,
right,
that has been paid without this body.
No, they went ahead and did the administrative. I registered my concerns about it, but I did not want to, I'm not sure that I could have, but I did not want to impede that, because it's important that we
Okay.
on our obligations.
So they use this body then to pay?
That was, I'm sorry, yeah, I may have not understood your question.
Okay.
Yes, that was the process used to get those reimbursements out.
So this is a done deal then? I mean, it's already operating.
That, yeah, the
It's already in
payment of that 6.9 is out there now. Like I say, I thought I'd understood, I was being told that that would be temporary. It reads like it's permanent to me, but I want to know what the responsibilities of the administrative board are, and what the responsibilities are of the actual TIF commission itself. So I'm kind of that's what I'm looking for, is to get an authoritative read on what the division of those responsibilities are before we say, yeah, we're okay with it. I'm not sure how much we can push back, but I think it's important that in any case, first step is that we as a commission have an understanding of how this is being set up.
And it's your understanding right now that no more TIFs can be approved in Kansas City, in Clay County, until the board is...
Until the relevant board meets. So, yeah, if there was a new TIF to be awarded in an area, my understanding is, and that's certainly what I understood TIF council to say, was that would require a meeting and a vote of the TIF commission itself, not the administrative committee.
Has our council weighed in on this?
He has a copy of it, and I've sent it to him. What I need to do before, and I don't know if Andy's been involved in that, but what I want to do is get the interpretation that is being put on it by TIF council and make sure that lines up, because if there are any inconsistencies, so I'm really wanting to get that to county council before we say, okay, give us the absolute read. There were also some different versions of that, so I got him what the most recent one was. The one that passed, the one that you guys see, is the latest one I had sent him, but I'd sent him drafts, so when you go through drafts, it gets a little bit convoluted sometimes. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. I'll complicate this even further for the county councilor, because I do believe this is a workaround, and it is a workaround designed to at least solve the immediate harm, which is for those who are dealing with these unpaid reimbursements. So just to use an example, Star Development is doing work in the Shoal Creek TIF area along 152 in Booth. All of that is them. They are in need of lots of reimbursement. This thing was created, I think, because state statute doesn't necessarily say how you do the reimbursement. So one can create whatever mechanism they want, because you've already said in the creation of the TIF, these are allowable sorts of expenses. So they've done the allowable expenses, now they've created a means by which to reimburse them. That's pretty clear to me. What is less clear is how state statute says a TIF is created. Now the way we do it here is you have a development, you create a project that may cause a TIF to be created, and then they move forward. But if I am not, or if I remember correctly, there is no requirement for a TIF commission to be created within a municipality. Municipalities, whether they are counties or cities, have the authority to provide redirection, but one doesn't have to create a TIF commission because that's not outlined, as opposed to in state statute, you have to have a land clearance redevelopment authority that is outlined within state statute. So I do wonder if the city has to do anything.
Not until there is a TIF application.
Until the TIF application comes.
Right. Or there is a modification to the TIF plan, then that requires the TIF commission to take action. And I would like to interject that this administrative committee that Kansas City has put in place, this administrative process, it is really a Kansas City process, because most cities that I've worked for, then when we have TIFs, the plan is approved by the commission, and the boundaries and everything you have to do legally is done by the TIF commission. But once that plan is approved, the administrative receiving an invoice, checking it against the plan, making sure it's approved, is typically done administratively by staff, right? But in Kansas City, Missouri, they have in the past made that a function of their TIF commission.
Right.
Because they choose to.
And the individual TIFs of that have been created.
Right.
So that has been the practice.
Right, that has been the practice, and so I believe they have created this new ordinance and creating this new administrative committee to perform that function of paying invoices and administrative aspects that the commission used to do, but now they can do that. They can delegate it to an administrative committee, and because the administrative committee is not defined under state statute like the commission, they can choose what the seats are and who the seats are on the administrative committee.
Right. So the real danger danger is maybe too strong a word, but the issue may come if a new project comes along within Clay County, Kansas City.
Right.
Now you don't have a structure, or at least there is a question to that structure as to whether or not it could form. So my interpretation would be that doesn't become an issue until somebody walks in one day to someone in Kansas City and says, I have a project and I'm gonna need TIF help with this, and then the problem will now resurface in search of a solution. So,
And that is not uncommon in smaller jurisdictions.
Sure.
Who don't have a TIF commission, but all of a sudden a project comes forward from a developer and they're talking, saying, hey, part of the economic incentive is, would the city consider a TIF? So at that point in time, a city will work and put together a TIF commission by state statute of who sits on that TIF commission.
Right.
So they are not required to have a TIF commission.
Right.
And it's really not detrimental until there is either a new application
right.
or a significant change to an existing plan that would require the TIF commission to weigh in.
Right.
And just for what it's worth, many of these TIF plans have multiple, certainly well into the double digits of amendments that are put on. I mean, it's pretty typical. The other thing that it's kind of a side issue, and that is we are having a number of our TIFs that are going to start dropping off in the next few years. So we will have fewer actually active TIFs. I don't know what that may or may not indicate, but that certainly would tell me that the possibility of more TIFs would be in the offing, especially as we get this done. But I agree with the observations that Commissioner Wagner made. That's why I'm trying to take this thing a step at a time. Let's see what the actual legal interpretation is of the TIF commission and figure out who it is we've got to push back on.
Yeah, and your point about the amendments is very well taken, because Shoal Creek, I think, is somewhere around Amendment 18.
Yeah.
Antioch Crossing is around Amendment, I don't know, 12 or 13. And so these amendments are fairly common, because any time there's a change, like with Shoal Creek, instead of building this road, we're going to put money into this road. Well, that was never a project that was ever outlined. So if that group decides we're going to take funds that have not been expended and now expend them over here, that becomes an amendment. And so it's for existing TIFs that we have up here, I won't say it happens every day, but it is certainly a fairly common occurrence that could happen once a year, sometimes twice. And so I interpret what has happened as we've removed the red light is no longer flashing because people are getting paid. However, there is an issue that may come down the road, and maybe sooner than we think. So I'll just leave it at that.
No, but you're absolutely right. The other thing, another example of how a TIF is amended would be change in boundaries. So if they want to add or take off certain areas. So yeah, I think this is a complex enough and a serious enough issue to where I think we proceed, if I might say so, I think we proceed step by step, checking off our boxes. Let's get the actual position, official legal position of the TIF commission. And if we are, and I suspect Commissioner Wagner is right, if we do end up having to push back at some point, we need to know who it is we're pushing back on specifically. There is, if we were to press our point of, if none of this had happened, would we then, would our beef so to speak, be with the TIF Commission because they are the ones who would be responsible for seating our members, or would it be the City of Kansas City? We need to, I think, get all of our information very much solidly in place so that if and when that happens, as Commissioner Wagner says, we are prepared to push back or to preemptively try to take some sort of action. First and foremost, we need to get the information and we need to make sure all commissioners are aware of it and then make a decision on how to go forward. Does that answer everybody's question? The questions, I should say. Any further discussion? Okay. And obviously, like this on any other issue, if any commissioner wants to talk to me offline, I'd be more than happy to sit down with them. That concludes the discussion items on this evening's agenda. That brings us to reports. Administrator, I think we have 2 reports.
Correct. There are 2 reports before you. The first is the auditor's cash basis monthly report for the end of June of 2023. It was in your packet. And also notification, I'm very excited about this for the budget team and the auditor's office, that we have received the Distinguished Budget Award for the fiscal year 2023 budget. This is the 2nd year in a row that the county has received this award from the Government Finance Officers Association. So it's a lot of hard work to put that together.
Absolutely. County Administrator, do you have any comments that you would like to make?
We appreciate everyone's tolerance with our technology issues today. Apparently, it's maybe subject to hot rooms also. We appreciate everybody's patience while the room is a little warm this evening. And notice that the next commission meeting will be next Wednesday, the 19th at 3 o'clock here in the hearing room.
Okay. That brings us to Commissioner comments. Commissioner Lawson?
Comments.
Oh,
Before I
sorry.
do commissioner comments, I just wanted to say something about Victor and the award that he received.
By the way, you were recognized for point of personal privilege. Proceed. You can go.
Okay.
No, I just want to
okay.
make sure parliamentarily we were.
Oh, thank you. Gracias. Okay, the whole point is that he is so good at what he does. And I think sometimes we take him for granted. But there has never been a time, and I think I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. There's never been a time during budget or anything of that nature that I've had questions. I've gone to him. He hasn't clarified what I need to know. And he doesn't make me feel like a dummy while he's doing it, you know? Even though he may think later when I walk out, gee, is she dumb? But he never makes me feel that way. And I really sincerely appreciate that. I think that you know, the things he does, like the slides he produces when we do our budget, the way that he, you know, dummies down those numbers as he always does. He's just such a darn asset. And I would like to be able to bribe him into not going away from us, staying with us forever, because he's doing a spectacular job. So congratulations, Victor. Well deserved, and probably many more accolades. I sincerely appreciate you.
So as long as you've got the mic, go ahead and if you have any comments.
No, I don't have any comments other than that, okay. Believe it or not.
Commissioner Withington.
Just want to say you guys look good without your ties on. Not the most underdressed up here. Maybe staff will join us next week and wear some Hawaiian shirts or something. So,
but at least you're wearing the coolest logo shirt. Commissioner Wagner.
As we've talked about, good job that our team is doing. I just wanted to point out, Stacy, I love. You never know who she's going to call on for a vote. And that means I'm always listening to her. That's probably why I make the motions, so I know that she's going to call me first, so I don't have to think about it. But all joking aside, she does a great job, and as the rest of the team does, and I appreciate their hard work. Thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter.
No comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
No comments, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson. I'm just going to make a couple of quick comments. One of the things that I'm going to try to make a habit of doing during these, and I'll try not to be overly verbose when we get to commissioner comments, I'm going to try to give a little bit of an idea of some of the things that I've been working on during the course of the sometimes previous week, but certainly within the time frame here. There was a meeting earlier today at the Northland Regional Chamber. The object of discussion was the World Cup. It's going to be, I think, it's going to be a good thing for all of us. There was a very 30,000 level discussion. There was a presentation made, a PowerPoint. We're going to be requesting that we get that and then that be distributed to all commissioners. Megan, our tourism lady, was there and took copious notes. And I think we're getting involved. Excuse me, we're getting involved at a good point where we are early on, but we are not. Clearly, we are not too early to be able to get involved in that. And the sheriff is gone. There was a meeting, I understand, today regarding 9/11. This was more in the line of the program whereby you would dial in if you were in Kansas City and you would do 1 for police, 2 for this. Yesterday was the meeting for people who were users, the hands-on people. The sheriff has, I believe, 4 members on that particular board, and he's going to get back to me with some of what happened. The other meeting is for more of the administrative elected officials is tomorrow, so I will be attending that, and I'll distribute whatever information I get. My understanding, it is specific to Kansas City. It's been characterized as an emergency meeting. I'm a little apprehensive about that. I would much rather have the information, and especially if it's going to be an issue of this sort, I would like to get the thoughts of the commission on this, but I'm certainly going to be consulting with the sheriff, and his opinion on how this should go forward is certainly going to be something I will weigh very heavily. Jay, of course, you are the alternate on that board, so clearly, you're more than welcome to attend that. I think you might have gotten the notification. And I want to make that mention that there are a lot of alternates. We have a lot of boards, and we have alternates. I would encourage alternates on any of those boards to attend those meetings so that we get the fullest possible information, and also so that they are up to speed as the best of their ability. Last thing I'll mention was there was a meeting Friday over at Northland Neighbors. It was a meeting conducted by or convened by Councilman O'Neill, and essentially what it was the newly elected city council members. They were not all there. There were some who were unable to attend, but the majority of them were. It was also attended by other civic leaders. My counterpart from Platte County was there. So it was a discussion basically on the Northland and what they can be doing to appropriately represent the Northland. The members who were there were generally either in district or at large. And for my part, I particularly appreciate the at-large members being there. They have obviously the bigger picture to keep in mind. But if we are going to advocate for what we can at Kansas City, we're going to need all the help we can get. And if those at-large members are open to our discussions, then I think that is a good thing. That's pretty much it for right now. Obviously, I can't discuss this kind of thing because we don't have it open for discussion, but Commissioner, if you would, Lawson, if you would like to add to your commissioner comments, please feel free.
Just a quick question on that. When they're going to have things of that issue, I always look at the calendar to see what's happening. They're never on there, and I understand why. But when they're going to have those kinds of meetings, can you have Diana zap out a email or something? Because there's a lot of those I would attend if I knew about them.
I don't want to get into anything that is going to be a violation of sunshine, but I think that that is a valid point that should be taken up. Like I say, because it's not a noticed subject, I'm a little apprehensive to go into any kind of discussion. Good point, though. And we'll have to take that up at a time when it is appropriate for us to discuss it. After the meeting would be okay. All right, that brings us to executive session. Is there a motion related to our executive session?
Yes, move to go into executive session pursuant to RSMO 610.021 sub 12 as it deals with contractual matters.
Motion has been made to go into executive session under Missouri State Statute 610.021, parentheses 12, and to adjourn therefrom. Discussion? Seeing none, you recognize to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Joanne. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be elusive there, but I didn't want to violate.
Oh, I understand that. Well, I mean, but when we do that, then maybe if there are a lot of people who say, they need to say to her, I want this. And then if they're not, then we need to help.
And it's going to be dependent on whether it's closed.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's why we got to kind of work through that a little.
Some of that I know is